Hi everybody, welcome back. Okay, so I'm making this video, probably one I'm going to use for posterity. One that basically introduces essentially the second half of this course, which is emphasizing more of the reporting end of things. This is going to be a story they're going to do. It's going to be derived based on whatever you want to call it, or a press release, the remaking of a press release. So press releases are essentially probably the number one way news is delivered right now and how it's received and how it's essentially processed. It used to be like you actually would go out on your own and do it on your own. What I did in this particular lesson is I had a guest speaker by the name of Bill Borden, and you're about to see him in the rest of this video. And what he's going to do is he's going to talk, he's going to give you a background into essentially what is business reporting and public relations journalism. And in those particular areas, you really do have to dig. You really do have to get information because how it's typically delivered to you is in a press release. The press release is meant to essentially spin it the company's way, spin it in a way so that the company can emphasize what it believes should be the top priority in the story. But what you need to do is you need to basically take that press release and look at it and say to yourself, is this the press release the way it's focused? Does it really matter to people? Does it really, when people shop at a store, do they really care about what's actually in this first paragraph? Because as we talked about in news stories, the first paragraph has the most important stuff. Now let me share. Now, the reason why I'm actually have given this little introduction to Bill's appearance, which is essentially what this video is about, is because well, first of all, the I did this in a class lecture, and the press release didn't really show up very well on the didn't show up really at all on the video, so I'm going to show it to you now. The second thing is that I think it's appropriate to actually provide some sort of introduction to Bill's appearance in my classroom because to provide some sort of context for what we're doing and why he's speaking. He will give instructions on what to do with this assignment, and I will too, but I'm going to give you some preliminary instructions right now. So let me just share this screen. Okay. Okay, here it comes. Okay. All righty. Now that. All right, so this is the press release. Okay. And Bill will, as he'll say later on the video, will act as the contact. This is a made-up press release. This is actually something that's fake. Okay. So we're gonna play a game of pretend here. All right. And the game of pretend essentially is this: is that you're going to write about something that actually is, I should say, it is based on something that actually happened. But you're gonna write on something, you're gonna dig in for information for a story that's going to be based on this press release, as I just said. Now, here's the deal. Here's what you really need to keep in mind as we discuss later in the video. So when you actually do any kind of like business reporting or um any kind of like contact with any kind of reporting, really, whether it's political or whatever, and you're dealing with public relations agencies, as I noted, they're trying to get their message out. What you have to do is again, you have to look at what they present, and you have to say to yourself, okay, so again, what is this if that really matters to the people overall? Um, so when you look at this press release, you'll see actually that it's about this company called Megalomania Media Company, and and it's a made up company again, and they're the leading provider of entertainment. And this is an exercise in not just in digging, but also in news judgment. Okay, so you have to basically judge to yourself when you are given this news information, which is often given to business reporters all the time. Yes, maybe this would matter. What they're doing is they're forming an office of chief executive and a broad restructuring of management roles. The company's restructuring. So that might matter. Sorry about my dog there. That might matter to a lot of people who are, in within the business world themselves. But what you want to do is you want to sell a story to the world at wide, okay? And when you see something about a restructuring, you're not really going to be that really really interested in it if you're the average person. You're not really going to give a crap about whether that's actually something that should matter to you, okay? Um, So what you have to do is you have to actually essentially look through the story to see if there is actually something that will actually matter to you. Okay, will matter to everybody. It doesn't always happen. Okay, restructuring of roles, hiring new CEOs, things like that are stuff that happen all the time in journalism. And in fact, we have a section in my magazine, Best Review, where we actually list essentially all the big executive changes all the time. But sometimes you get something that's buried in a press release and you say to yourself, wait a minute, that needs expansion, that needs more emphasis. That's something that can matter to a broader audience. Okay. So in the video with appearance with Bill, I'm pointing to this and I'm showing everybody basically. I'm not going over it very specifically in the video, but I'm talking about how this lists like a bunch of things, developments have happened within the company. What you have to do is you have to find essentially, there's essentially one paragraph that basically stands out overall. It gives a clue into something that like goes beyond business sense, goes beyond, maybe you can even argue that goes into essentially some sort of subject matter that deals with lack of morality, or that, to put it mildly. Okay. That basically is something that could happen to anybody, anything, in any kind of field, politics, florists, I don't care. Okay. So here right here is you have an office of chief executive at restructuring, and then they talk about essentially who is essentially being put into these management roles. Okay. And they go into some, again, actually, some of these names are actually not made up, but it's a made up story because what my friend did, he's an old Mets fan and he inserted names of old Mets players in here. So anyway, for lack of a better term, basically, the point was there essentially is we don't want people Googling to find out a real press release and just do whatever story was made out of it. So we want you to do this on your own. Kind of like it's like kind of like like my argument about AI. The same thing. We want you to do this on your own. We want you to do something just and copy. We don't want you to copy something from somewhere else. So it goes into some more detail about Mion. That's what Felix Mion is one of the. I think he's actually the chairman, new chairman, and what they do. Some of the stuff they do. They have a people's first approach. He has some of his Bill's dark humors here, that sort of thing. Okay. Um, what Youngblood did. Sorry, I got a little smaller. All right. And then how this management structure is going to allow them to pursue a broad range of entertainment, that sort of thing. Our corporate culture will not change one iota, one iota. I'm sorry. Keep talented people working here, keep shareholders happy. And it says the board of directors has asked for and received the resignation of Marv Bronson, co-founder of Megalomania Media, and the board's actions were taken after internal investigation and a consultation with external counsel and the circumstances related to his conduct. And then it essentially says to conclude facts. They concluded that the facts reflected poorly on Mr. Brosman's judgment. All right, so the point here is that you basically have to kind of figure out in this story what is the matter, what is the stuff that matters to more people than just like some small group of people who are nerdy business types. Okay, something that maybe maybe people appeal to the people read like People Magazine or TMZ or that sort of thing. Okay, um, and essentially like turn the story upside down. And so whatever subject matter you find in this press release, that needs to become the focus of the story. That needs to become the lead of the story. Okay. And then what you have to do is you have to go to Bill at this, you have to email Bill. I was just doing that right away because you have, a limited amount of time to do this story. Okay. But you go to Bill right away and you email him and he will give you information. It could be a very basic question along the lines of like, what really happened here? You find out what the lead is first. And what you could do is you could also actually email me if you need help. Certainly find out what you think the focus should be. Maybe just really suggest it first and I'll try to help you along. I'm not going to give you the answer unless you get it right. And then maybe go to Bill after that. And then I would do it right away. Just say like, what happened here? Okay. And what he'll do is he'll provide you some information, some documents that will, sorry for the noise, that will actually, um, provide more detail on exactly what happened. You have to pay really close attention to the details, especially the Excel spreadsheet of what happened. Okay. So anyway, here I give you Bill Borden. Thank you very much.
This is Bill Borden. He's been a guest speaker of mine for a very long time. He's been very generous with his time. He's worked in journalism. I should be honest with you. This is Nepo. Okay, he's a Nepo baby. We've been friends in diapers. Okay, so joke. Anyway, but this guy's been a very successful journalist. So what we're going to talk about today, actually, essentially, is public relations and business writing in particular, because those essentially are two areas of journalism that have actually, well, you could argue this, I guess, right, Bill? But
Yeah.
where there's been actually some like a steady growth, I would say. Yes, there's been cutbacks in PR and something like that, but these are two career options for you to consider if you actually do think about going in journalism. And a lot of people, in my classes actually don't go into journalism now. That's fine. Um, so anyway, so Bill has actually worked in these fields for a very long time. He worked for Reuters, which is one of the largest business news agencies in the world. And he also worked for various PR agencies. And now he works with me at AM Best. Which is essentially his business journalism. And the thing about business journalism is that it's probably, like I said, there's growth, but it's probably the most basic way to learn how to like really write and report. When you think about it, like what's like a typical business story report about? Uh, Stocks, very good. Yeah. And what does stocks involve? Money, right? Money, economy, all that stuff. Okay. You know, so you have to do a little bit of digging sometimes. And we're going to talk about digging and how to get that information and what's behind the numbers and stuff like that. But first, I'd like you to actually, it's good, it's important for you to actually meet people who are in the field and have actually succeeded in it. Bill, like I said, worked for Reuters, one of the largest news agencies in the world, and he worked for various PR agencies. Bill, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself that I haven't already told you? Who are you
Oh,
anyway?
okay.
What are you all
Uh,
about?
Tom and I went to the same elementary school together, or I should say, Professor Davis and I went to the same elementary school and
I'm
high
in high
school,
school.
and we both edited the high school newspaper as seniors, um,
Oh,
and then we went our separate ways. Tom went to Rutgers. I went to what is now known as the College of New Jersey. Back when I was there, it was Trenton State College. Um, and then we let's see. Well, we both worked at our respective college newspapers. At Trenton State College, I worked at a weekly called The Signal. We published every Tuesday, so my Monday nights were usually spent putting together the college newspaper. I was a production manager, a news editor, and a sports editor while I was there. Um, I also obtained internships at the Trenton Times and the Asbury Park Press. Um, a bit of advice to all of you: if you have any interest in going into the writing field, journalism, get your clips while you're in college. There's no better way to go into a job interview than to have a portfolio of published work.
it's funny
And
you say that, Bill, because I mean, I love my son and everything, but he now he wants to go into journalism, and he just graduated college, and like the whole time he was in Boston, I was like, "Look for the newspaper."
yeah,
And it's not like actually working for the newspaper is actually you don't have to be in journalism to go work for a newspaper. It's actually good to get some sort of portfolio. You know, I mean, it's in fact you can work for Patch for nothing. I mean, nobody likes that, but that's probably the numero uno if you want to get like some sort of a job, maybe soon after college, something like that. Is have some sort of portfolio.
yeah,
So,
and it's really, really an easy time to do it. I mean, your college newspaper always needs the help. They'll, sometimes you have to get past the clickiness to get assignments,
yeah.
but usually they'll give you easy assignments at first just to see if you could write well. Um,
And my
One,
niece, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bill, again, I'm sorry. My niece, by the way, was a microbiology major at RIT, and she was like the editor of the newspaper, so. And now she works at Rutgers as a microbiologist, how about
oh, very cool.
that?
No, and I think, I think it's important to get a broad range of experience. In some ways, I think sociology would be as good of a major to lead you into a career in journalism because that gives you some idea of looking at bigger picture issues or themes or trends that you see in the industry. But I think what's most paramount is writing well, writing clearly, writing accurately. Speed should be the last priority. You want to get it right because you can't be any worse than wrong when you're writing. If you get it first and you get it wrong, you're just completely undercutting yourself and damaging your credibility. So it's really important that you get it right. So accuracy is paramount. One of the key elements also is when you're doing any sort of reporting, you need to attribute who you're getting your information from. That's the first question that any reader or editor is going to have is who says this? Who is saying this, and it's really a key element in financial reporting, political reporting. Um, it basically having your sources lined up and making clear who is saying what, and that also gives your reader a sense of, is there a point of view that this source, why is this source telling the paper this? Um, so you'll probably have additional lessons later on when you're talking about how to attribute facts. Some people might have a vested interest in saying, I'll give this to you on background, and that means they want to inform you, but don't attribute the details to that particular source. And they're just kind of leading you in a way to go verify it on your own by additional sources. Um, so that's a very, that's a much deeper discussion when you're talking about sources and not negotiating how to attribute particular details. Um,
When you do that, Bill, it's like, what does that, when you say he said, she said, they said, what does that do? What does that give the story? It gives it,
well, yeah, you want to be fair when you're reporting.
right.
You don't want to. You always want to give people an opportunity to respond to negative details. I mean, even if you're under a tight deadline, you should at least pick up the phone and make a call to see if you could get somebody on the line. And if a story is particularly inflammatory, you might want to give them a bit of leeway rather than, like, hey, you got 3 minutes to tell me your response to this. It's especially if it's very, very damaging. When we were when I was at Reuters, one of the things that we had to be careful about was if there were bankruptcy rumors about a company, um, because once you put it out there that there's rumors of a bankruptcy, all of a sudden creditors and suppliers get very nervous because they might not get their money back and they might like withhold. Let's put it this way, you could be that story that says, oh, this company's on the verge of bankruptcy. That might be the tipping point that pushes them into bankruptcy and essentially could cause undue problems. So I think you want to be fair when you're reporting. Um, and I
Bill,
think that,
how did you start out? Like, would you,
oh, well, yeah, I mean, going to Reuters was not my first job by any stretch. I mean, I had my internships when I was in college, and then I had trouble finding a job getting at a newspaper right out of school, even though I had these clips. It took me about a year to find work. So I was working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, but I still wanted to write. Um, Sold insurance for a while, still trying to get my foot in the door at a newspaper. Eventually, I worked at the Ocean County Observer and then the Times Beacon newspapers, uh, working at a weekly. And at that weekly, I covered everything from town hall, school boards, police, feature stories, uh, community events. I mean, it was really a good starting ground to get a lot of broad exposure and a lot of writing done. I was responsible for filling 4 broadsheet pages, which is no easy feat every week. So you kind of wrote longer than you might otherwise would, especially when you're covering town meetings. Um, what some papers would do is, is like, oh yeah, give me 500 words on this story. You might go as long as 1,000 words, because you just need to fill the space. Um, it really depended on what sort of news hole you have, because you're putting the copy around the ads at the newspaper. Since everything's gone digital, you do have a bit more leeway when it comes to story length, but I think there's also a general sense that you don't want to write too long because most people are reading the news on their phones. You want to keep it to maybe, unless it's really compelling, 1,000 words is tops for a pretty significant story. I mean, you might go longer if it's like a huge feature that has, significance, or uh, the the subject matter is really, really compelling. I don't think most town meetings make that bar. So you should keep your reader in mind when you're writing these articles. And
That's like the most basic level, right? Like the town meetings for he's referring to like council meetings, local school board meetings, things like that. That's like your most basic. That's like one of the first things you do if you ever were to work in a newspaper or news field is probably do something like that. And there's a need for that because they've been cutting a lot of the places have been cutting back on that kind of coverage, and you want to know if like people are raising taxes in town or if your town like Eagleswood Township is lacking sewers and the septic is backing up in the backyard. Actually, but Bill, you love journalism.
I do. It's fun, you know.
Your mama used to tell me see, I'm sorry. This is nepotism right here. I'm sorry. Your mom used to tell me about how you used to read the newspaper when you walked down the street, North Stream Parkway, in Point Pleasant Borough.
Yeah. Well, I was so always.
I used to read in the back seat of my mama's car myself. I used to read the sports section. And
Yeah.
anyway, but then but you had a baby when you were like 25, 26, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were like hell bent on like succeeding in this field, even though you were like wasn't a lot of money, but you enjoyed it. And unlike a lot of people actually have switched from something like the sciences or something like that to this because they just want to do something they want to enjoy. Is that how you felt, Bill?
Yeah, I think so. And one of the things that I found was, I enjoyed covering local news, and when I became a dad at 25, I was looking to move on to a bigger publisher. I mean, I didn't expect to go right to Reuters from a weekly newspaper, but Reuters basically gave me a solid middle class job rather than a job where you're making $310 a week and kind of struggling to get your bills paid. Um,
You. I don't mean to keep interrupting. I'm sorry, but this is all praise. Bill is a genius. Like
no,
right now, yeah, he is. Do you ever hear of Ayn Rand? He reads Ayn Rand in like what 2 hours or something like that.
no, hell no. That's
Or
not.
like a day and a half, right?
No, those books were 900 pages. They were some heavy duty reading, and looking back, it's a bit of a slog, quite frankly.
Yeah, but I, don't wanna- I read like a first sentence and I'm like, no. And then I pull out a comic book or something from Charles Schultz. But
No,
but
my
he
most,
like but he to give yourself some credit. You went into that job. They liked you. and he took you and you succeeded in it. I mean, and you made it was a pretty big leap, but you were qualified to do it, and that happens. I mean, it's he went from a weekly newspaper to this major news agency, Reuters, because of his smarts, and then he succeeded at it. And he you basically took like any job they offered you when you went to Reuters, right? I mean, like whether it was
Well,
overnight.
the equities, yeah, the equities desk was just I mean, just it's the very definition of a news mill. Basically, we would have PR Newswire feeding us the news, and it would be just every like if you're basically writing financial news for stock traders, and they depend on speed and accuracy more than anybody. Um, the idea is that if your company is has shares that are traded on the marketplace, one of the obligations is for those companies to disclose how much money they're making every quarter, disclose news that might influence the direction of a stock price, good or bad. They can't hide the news, although some companies have tried to release news at dodgy times, hoping that it would be ignored. But I think one of the things that you find out about markets is that they do react when things come out. One of the dodgiest d disclosures that I've seen was when a company put out a profit warning on, like in the evening of July 3rd, hoping that the July 4th holiday would kind of dwarf the news. And
What do they call that,
next,
Bill?
the next trading day, well, it's, just,
News dump.
yeah, news dump. You'll find a lot of bankruptcies get declared at at 5 o'clock on a Friday, hoping that it only appears in the Saturday edition of the paper rather than the Sunday edition.
We
So
see
it's,
this stuff in the presidential campaign too. We see
oh,
this.
absolutely. No, nobody, I think, you know, and I guess one of the things that you do, I mean, I'm sure some of you want to go into PR, some of you want to go into journalism. I mean, if you go into neither, learning how to write well is just really important for your career, no matter what you do. Whether you want to go into law, academia, marketing, or just being a manager somewhere, you have to be able to write well to share your thoughts and help sell your thoughts to investors, your managers, your bosses, your colleagues, your fellow employees who may report to you at some point. Um, I also, if you do want to go into any sort of management field, I also highly recommend developing presentation skills. Um, Being able to speak in front of a crowd and articulate a plan is a crucial skill for leadership. I can't stress it enough because I think um, just putting up a bunch of slides and talking, regurgitating what you see on a slide doesn't really do much as far as presentation skills. I think you need to be able to go up and here's your use those slides. If you're going to be using the slides, what you want to do is talk to the slides, not just regurgitate the slides. So that's those slides are only tools to keep you on track if you're presenting before an audience, and just don't use them as a complete crutch and bore your audience. So that's a little bit of a sidetrack there, but in terms of going into well, I mean, I was at Reuters for 12 years. I'll just go back to that. I worked at the equities desk. I covered retailing. It was fun for a bit. I also moved into the field of healthcare because I got tired of retailing. I think one of the things that you would help you in your career is to be willing to learn what other people don't want to learn. Hard subjects are always good. Science, economics, technology, um, I think will give you a much more stable place in the job front rather than focusing on writing about pop culture because I don't, it's very hard to break through doing that because it's kind of seen as light material. Um,
Well, you cover the Versace family.
I did. Like I said, I moved on after a few years of covering retailer, but I mean, there are fun moments. I after Gianni Versace was murdered in front of his home in I think it was Miami Beach. He was down in Miami, but I don't know if it was Miami Beach, but it was in one of the
Yeah.
most affluent
Miami
neighborhoods in the city. He was murdered by a man. I think it was 1996. But his family had to show that the business was still viable, even though Gianni was the guiding creative force of this business.
Fashion.
So yeah, so his family invited a bunch of reporters over, and it was quite a shows you really how the other half lives because he had this mansion down in Miami, but he had a townhouse on the Upper East Side that was barely a stone's throw away from Central Park. Um, and I met Donatella Versace. I met his brother Santo, and they kind of did this meet and greet with reporters to let them know that the business is still going on. Uh, I ended up coming away with this story. The brother was talking about actually taking the company public. It never came to be because, I mean, when you do take your company public and sell shares to outside investors, you kind of have to like do a lot of disclosures. And, I think family businesses, I mean, it does help with bringing in new capital, but if you're essentially bringing in enough capital and keeping the family happy, I mean, why do you want to open the doors to having other people tending to your business? I mean, you'll see it in the technology world where, you know, uh, I mean, here's an example. Mark Zuckerberg basically took Facebook public close to 20 years ago. I mean, at some point he needed to, bring in additional capital because he had other outside investors that were looking to cash out. And that's the way the venture capital business works. You pitch your company to them, they come in, they fund it, but at some point they want an exit so they could go and invest in the new next big thing. And what happens is those successes um, cover a lot of failed investments at venture capital firms. So it's one of those things that, they know what they want to do. They know what their holding period is for companies. So they don't want to be sitting on uh, they don't want to when a company's public, the fastest growth is typically behind it. So they want out and they want to go in and put their money elsewhere. So that's that's just one of those things that you have to be mindful of.
How'd you cross over into PR? Like, I know you went to graduate school, which I recommend anybody because that's the way things are nowadays. Um, you know,
Yeah, I went to night school at Montclair State and picked up an MBA going to night classes 2 days a week. And some of those days were kind of rough because I would be up at 5:30 in the morning at my desk by 7 a.m., work from 7 to 3, then get in my car, go to Montclair State, do my homework, and then go to class till about 9:30, and then get home by 10:15 or so, and then I wouldn't be able to go to sleep till about midnight. And so then you get up at 5:30 and start it all over again. There were a lot of times where you find yourself working on projects after your class, and you might be going to work on 3 hours of sleep. Not something I recommend, but that's just sometimes what the circumstances dictate. So I but yeah, I studied finance. So I do have some quantitative skills beyond the reporting skills that I gathered. And with the finance, it's funny, the with the graduate degree, I did take some business classes as an undergraduate. So I took financial accounting, managerial account, managerial accounting, macro and microeconomics, marketing. So I did have a couple baseline courses in business before I went to get my master's, but I found that with the master's level courses, we covered what I learned in the undergraduate class for a full semester in 3 weeks. And then they would just, it was like next level kind of work. You basically, that whole adage about you do 1 hour of classwork, you put in 3 hours of classwork on top of that was typically the norm. Um, and with final projects, you might find yourself doing even more than that. So uh, I graduated that with an MBA in 2002. About 3 years later, I mean, wire service reporting is a bit of a treadmill. I mean, you can make a great living doing it. It's I was looking for new challenges, so I went into public relations. Worked at a PR agency called Coin PR from 2005 until 2012. It was a fast-growing agency. We had some top-flight clients there. I worked mostly on their healthcare and higher education accounts. What you'll find is, you basically learn a bit about business strategy and where PR, public relations and communications fits into a marketing plan. There's the adage that uh, advertising's paid for and publicity's prayed for. Um, so you'll see huge marketing budgets spent on trying to get the word out about particular brands, but sometimes you need the PR element to help either amplify that marketing spend, or in some circumstances the you can, if it's done well, the PR program can actually help build the brand more effectively than the advertising element, because one of the things about PR is you need to be truthful and you need to be true to whatever brand that you're trying to position when you're talking to reporters, or and I think with social media, you're seeing new refinements to how brands position themselves and how they build themselves. I think just about every brand today has a social media element to it, because this little handy dandy gadget, the phone, is uh, as part, it's part of everybody's lives nowadays. So you do have opportunities for engagement there. So, and I think that's one of the things that you want to do when you're doing any sort of public relations work, is engage your audience. Um,
Just like you would in a mainstream news organization, right?
yeah, oh yeah, you want to position yourself with reaching top flight media outlets. I mean, that's really what your clients are paying you for. So, I did work at Coin for 8 years, and then I moved on. Well, what happened was a client took some work in-house, and this is a thing that happens with PR agencies. Clients will take work in-house because they're spending lots of money, and sometimes when they make a budget cut, that basically leaves the agency in the lurch. And the agency, I was uh, let go because there was, just a tight situation budget wise. client takes work in-house, there's $1 million hole that sometimes needs to be filled. And that's $1 million hole. Yeah, basically $1 million hole in that circumstance.
Because of your brevity and your charm and your geniusness, you landed with your 2 feet flat on the floor at the world's greatest verbalizing. You, what should I say? Insurance
Well,
rating.
no, I worked at a few smaller agencies and you know, freelanced a bit. Then it turns out that one of my colleagues from Coin PR had found a position at KPMG, and I worked there for another 8 years, essentially. The
Really? Wow, I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah, yeah, and uh, you know, that's one of those things that you really need to keep in mind, that it's important to build up that portfolio of good work over your career and have good working relationships with people over the years, because that's going to help you for your next position, no matter where you go. I mean, you know, if you act like an idiot or a jerk in the workplace, people remember that and they will hold that against you. So, you know, try and stay humble no matter where you go. Uh, or just at least be nice to people. You know, I mean,
So I
you
got,
know,
I got a story, Bill. I don't mean to cut into your time, but I'll try to keep it short. Bill's heard this one before. I well, this is the extreme example, but I know a guy my freshman year at Rutgers. I won't say his name, Rob Schumann, but anyway, he uh, he was a little weird, but he was okay. It seemed right, and he was a big Mets fan. And then I didn't really see him for a couple of years, and then my senior year, he's walking around, just like kind of walk around aimlessly, and he starts eating lunch with me and stuff, and my friend Al Lubeck. And the next day, this is back when broadsheet papers were a big deal, the paper edition. Across the front page, man arrested or indicted on 33 counts of sexual molestation or something. It was terrible. It was him. So
Jesus.
yeah. So and I remember like some of the comments were like, "I never knew." People were saying that stuff. 20 years later, I used to tell the story up to that point. 20 years later, I'm sitting in my newspaper office at the Bergen Record. It's around 2006, I think. And I see his familiar beat, his walk going across the floor. I'm like, oh my God, that's Rob Schumann. I kind of just said it like that. And then like person sitting next to me, I mean, there was no time for me to think. I mean, I absolutely had to report this, obviously, but I did have a moment there. I was like, what do I do? And then like I actually said, oh my God, that's Rob Schumann. And then a woman next to me was next to me. Her name was Ruthie. She goes, what? And I told her a little bit. She goes, I'm calling a lawyer. And turned out that they had to hide me in Trenton for a week. How do you get
Oh, wow.
how do you get hidden in Trenton, right? And so then because they would probably figure out that it was me, and he'd probably figure out it was me. They found out that actually they were really glad. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but they were really glad that I discovered that, because it was 2006 and we were still up to date on like the digital stuff, up, kept keeping all this stuff, even though he had written about this like 20 years before, this same newspaper, because he was from that area. And he apparently we found out that he actually left other positions before the same reason. So yeah, it's and I actually had to go to the New Brunswick Library to find the article that showed like what his adjudication was, and I had to go to this is 2006. I had to go to microfiche. I doubt that'll be the issue now. Anyway, the point is that of course that's the extreme example, but the point is that you really like need to be clear about who you are, what you do, that sort of thing. And get those, get on LinkedIn, get recommendations, that sort of thing, no matter what position you go into. Um, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Right?
don't be afraid to use LinkedIn to show your work as well. I mean, that's basically what it's there for, and and also to build connections with people that you work with or have projects with. I have over 1,300 connections on LinkedIn. I mean, that's really you know a great network to have for your career. I'll kind of give an overview of the assignment. It's basically a fictional media company, Megalomania Media. Um, so if you do any sort of Googling of the people that are referenced in it, you're basically you will see old Mets players' names rather than people that are, you know,
Yeah.
actually true business executives.
This is gonna be a game of pretend, and this is what I
Yeah,
posted this morning. So, yeah, but since we're
but
now moving into the reporting phase of the course, this time will require you to do more than just repeat what's told to you. This will look to get people to think on their feet. We're playing a game of pretend, as I just said, and you really have to act quickly. Okay, I know. Look, I was a student too. Bill was a student too. You know about the whole thing about like waiting till the last minute. I get it. To do stuff. That's I understand, but this one really, you know, any kind of journalism, any kind of any kind of work really, but especially in journalism, I think. Um, it's really like situational in terms of like what you got to do, what you got to in order to get information. You got to like take into consideration the calendar, like when people are available and that sort of thing. Okay. Of course, this was a bigger issue before we had the internet, but when you had to rely on people on phones and stuff like that, you couldn't call people at night. But now you can like just email people, whatever, and then they'll answer you anytime. But the point is that it's really like a good to get a jump on things ahead of time, even just like sending out an email saying, "What is this? Okay, what is this story about?" Okay, so what you're going to get essentially is this: you have to act quickly. And you're going to get essentially is this press release that's actually embedded into this story assignment. Okay. Now here's where I talk about like why we're shifting more into reporting mode. So what we've been doing so far is pretty much just standard straight reporting. You interview somebody, you're told what to do, you're told what they're about, you're told what's unique. Now you're going to be presented with something that's actually kind of what they call in baseball, essentially a screwball or a knuckleball, where it's unpredictable. Okay, and where you have to actually essentially craft something on your own and use your own news judgment. And it's not so easy. It's not like right there in your face necessarily. The reporter radar, as I've described before, isn't going to necessarily go off right away. What happens is, and Bill will tell you this, is that there's a lot of companies, especially like companies that are going through some sort of a bad time. And I'm not saying this is a scandal or anything wrong or anything like that. And Bill will tell you public relations, this is what public relations is all about, is that your audience is not the direct public typically, it's the media. Okay. So you want to like present to the media if there's something that's going wrong with the company or something, you want to present it in a good light. It's called
yeah,
spinning, right, Bill?
well, yeah, and really one of the things that you want to do if you're in public relations is if you have a story that is significant, you want to get ahead of it. If you're on the PR side of the fence and you want to turn what could be like a multi-day bad story into cut that timeline into fewer and fewer days. You don't want things dragging on and on. So you want some degree of damage control where you take your hit just one day. Sometimes you can't do that if there's ongoing issues, especially if your company is in court on a particular matter.
Right.
That's something where you have less control, but that's one of those things where when you're in the field of PR, you want to have a plan of action. Like, okay, how do you manage a communications plan when you have people saying bad things of you about your company in a court of law? Um, so you
What I can tell you, and I say this in the assignment, is that like, so you have that kind of situation like as Bill was describing, where like you may end up in court, you may end up in jail, you may end up at, you may maybe business executives led away in handcuffs. This isn't really the case with this particular
yeah No.
In this press release, but
No, in fact, what happens with a lot of executive, you see, when your company is publicly traded, you announce an executive change because that's something that could move the stock one way or another. The idea is that when you have outside investors, that's when you have to have some degree of transparency about who's in charge, how much money are you making, is this, give your investors a sense of the direction of the business. So those are important elements in any sort of announcement that you might be making as a business.
so you just pretend that it's like the breaking news on the day it's due. Okay, that makes sense. What I can tell you is that basically this lead of this press release right here is not going to be the lead of your story. I can tell you that much. Okay, it says Megalomania Media Companies, Megalomania Media Company. It's a made-up company, like Bill said. The world's leading provider of entertainment. I don't know that. I mean, we got Disney in the world. This is what public relations does. Is it basically wants to present everything in its best light. Nothing, doesn't say anything wrong with that. It's just part of business. And now it is forming an office of the chief executive in a broad restructuring of management roles. Okay, so you have to ask yourself is, like, let's say I'm trying to shop for something. I don't know. At a mall or something like that. I want entertainment or something like that, and I go to the Megalomania store, and I want to shop there. And I think to myself, well, I don't know if I want to shop there because they're going through a broad restructuring of management role. You think that would really happen? Nobody really care, right? Isn't that kind of boring? What you want to do is you want to humanize this. You want to TMZ this. You know what's TMZ? Anybody know? I mean, that's hyperbole, TMZ. But what's TMZ? Anybody know? TMZ, by the way, is they're not entirely responsible. In fact, they pay people for money and that sort of thing, for information and stuff like that. I don't recommend them as a journalism thing, but one thing, they are probably one of the most popular news media sites because they report on the scandals, and oftentimes they're the first. I hate to say this, but this is not a good thing. But when Kobe Bryant unfortunately passed away, they were the ones that broke the story. So it's like they are actually kind of out in front of these things. So anyway, what you want to do is you want to find whatever essentially scandal is it within here, okay? And but what you have to do is there's a paragraph in here, okay, that really kind of should call out to you what this story is about. What I'd like you to do, if everybody's paying attention and listening to me right now, okay, is to find that paragraph. And this is not required, but I really strongly recommend that you reach out to me. We can do this in class too, okay? You reach out to me and you say what you think this story should be focused on. Which paragraph? There's actually two paragraphs, really. But
yeah, there's a couple things that should be what are red flags that basically should set off like your news nose or your meter for whenever you're in journalism, you have to think about the primary question is who cares, like, and you have to like look at all news from that standpoint, and why would my audience care about this?
Right. And so like when you're actually like shopping or something like that, now you might actually find something within this press release that may lead to information that make me think like, ew, Megalomania, ew, that sort of thing. So, but this is all
or a bigger question is why are they reshuffling the management?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
They're reshuffling the management. They're making everything look good. Look, we're improving everything. We're making everything look good. The company's great, in great shape, but they're only doing that because something bad happened. So now here's the thing though, okay? What you need to do is now Bill's gonna play an acting role. Okay, he's gonna play essentially the spokesman. Bill, you don't mind being quoted directly as with your name? That's okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I figure and yeah, please send me an email if you have questions tied to this press release.
This is just so you know, in real life, this is Bill's not actual job. So if you do any kind of like Google search, this is not gonna come up. I've had people like say like, it's funny, like, oh yeah, they're trying to, this is past years, okay? I've had a couple people come up to me and say like, I Googled this to see what was there. I was like, why are you Googling this? Are you trying to find the story? Well,
Yeah, we're
get it up.
we
It can't be
we're saying this. Yeah,
AI.
this company is completely fictional. It's something that I cooked up in my imagination, but believe it or not, it's based on real events.
It's actually based on a real thing that actually happened, yes. I've actually had a couple people have discovered that, so. But anyway, what you need to do is you need to find that what would be essentially the lead or the focus of the story within this press release. And then you need to go to Bill and email him here, okay? If that's okay, Bill?
Yep,
And,
yep.
and then,
It's my Yahoo email address. Yeah.
Yahoo, right? And basically say to him, what really happened here? Okay? Bill's gonna supply you some pieces of information that will have it. And actually, it's not gonna necessarily, he's gonna play a little bit of like, I guess you could say, fake out or whatever, where you're not necessarily gonna get, it's not gonna be like so readily apparent what the information you need is, okay? He's gonna give you, one of them is, I won't tell you too much, but one of them is gonna be a voucher on an Excel spreadsheet. And that's going to contain some very important information that actually makes this story more of a scandalous story, okay? And basically one that will make this much more interesting than just some restructuring of a company, okay?
It's called color.
Yeah, right. So basically that'll have information. And that stuff, first of all, you need to find like what's the big thing that happened that caused them to restructure their roles. And then you got to find out what led, find out more information about that one happening. And he's got that information. You need to email him. And I would do that ASAP, just without even thinking. You don't even have to
Yeah, just read the press release, come up with 2 or 3 good questions, and I should be able to help you out.
Right. And then, yeah, exactly. Okay. Has everybody got that? Okay. I mean, I would email them today. Just email them to say, hello, hi, what's going on here? Or just,
Yeah.
actually, I would suggest that if you want to be really careful, maybe just try to find out what you think maybe the focus of the story should be. One that would appeal not just to the media, not just to business executives, but like I said, that whole TMZ world, or even not just TMZ world. This is something that would be in the New York Times. I mean, this is something that basically could really shake the reputation of a company as much as
Yeah.
else.
And what happened here is something that did happen in an executive suite 20 some odd years ago, and it had and it was at a very large company and had far reaching consequences about companies being examined about how they're run and what's called corporate governance, where you see one of the things that when you have a large company, you have a chief executive, but you have a board of directors that's responsible of with hiring the chief executive and setting broad policy for the company. And then that chief executive is meant to execute that policy. So, so even if you're the top dog in any publicly traded business, you do answer to a board. And there have been multiple times where I've had discussions with chief executives, and they would be like, "Well, I got to sell this into my board," and they're, or they it's one of those facts of life that they have to deal with when you know they they are held extremely accountable, believe it or not. If they don't perform up to par, they could easily be replaced. But that's at a company with good governance. Where there's companies with lackadaisical governance, it's kind of like the CEO might pack the board with his or her friends, and that's where you have shoddy, like um, that's where businesses tend to get into trouble, where you start to see, oh, the board was asleep asleep at the wheel and they didn't really rein the CEO in.
You can write a 500, 800 word story on this, just like we've been doing, okay? He'll send you a document that provides some of the depth you need. He sends you that document will provide crucial and vital information for this assignment. But again, you have to figure out the focus first, okay? And then quoting documents is something that reporters do. I mean, you just basically say according to the document. Okay, that's how you attribute
Yeah.
it.
And just, yeah, mention what kind of document you're citing. That's also very important too.
And then, I'm available for any kind of help too. So, anyway, Bill, I wanted to thank you again very much, Bill.
Yep.